Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, coast to coast. Great to have you with us on the program. As mentioned, our guest today is author Siegfried Finser. He's the founder of RSF Social Finance. It's a nonprofit financial services organization that has pioneered associative economics by connecting financial transactions with the highest intentions of the human spirit. He currently serves on the board and advises selected clients. He's written children's books, plays, and books about money and destiny. His current novel is called Collision. It features the struggle of humanity between head and heart domination. He's been a Waldorf school teacher, a corporate executive, and a consultant, manager of a division of Xerox, director of economic development worldwide for ITT. He received his BA from Rutgers and MA from New York University. His published works include Money Can Heal, Footprints of an Angel, and A Guide to Full Enrollment. The book we're talking about today, as I mentioned, is called Collision. It's been described as, well, a book that deals with human nature, people caught in a whirlwind of power struggles and moral conundrums. It's an excellent book. It's called Collision. It's available all across the country. And the author, Sheldon Finser, with us on This Week in America. Sheldon, welcome Siegfried, to the program. It's great to have you with us.
I can't believe how you got that all in just a couple of seconds. Unbelievable. Rick, you are something.
Well, and what a life you've had. And I want to talk about that here during the course of the program here. But in talking about Collision, this really is a gripping book. And I mentioned this is basically, it's a collision. You've got a couple of cultures going head to head. Talk a little bit about Armand Dillon. He's a guy that's sort of ruthless. He'll do anything to get what he wants. In this case, it's acquire another company. Talk about his character.
Well, first of all, he has eliminated all feelings from any of his decision making, and that's one of his outstanding characteristics. And another remarkable thing about him is that he's not very attractive. And one would like to think that he's totally evil, but I wanted to be sure in this book that he isn't totally evil, because I don't believe that there is such a thing in the world, that someone is totally evil and has no good in them. So my sense was that everybody has some good and some evil in them. So I wanted to bring this out in the course of this story, which can be taken purely as a story, an exciting story about the values that people carry and how they clash with one another over these values.
Where did this story come from? Is this based on anything in your personal life that you were sort of taking notes as you were going through and thought this would make a compelling story at some time?
Well, don't forget, I was in corporate life
Yes.
quite a period of my time, and so there are many stories that come out of that, which are basically hidden in the corporate annals, where you don't ever get the true story outside. Inside there's always there's both the visible and the invisible taking place on a daily basis. So that's one reason it came about. But Rick, I've been studying how evil really comes about, and that's what led me to this particular book. How does evil come about? And I've come to the conclusion that evil is only something that's in the wrong place. It isn't necessarily bad. It's something that might have been good, but it's in the wrong place.
Interesting. Siegfried Finser, our guest in the program, his new book is called Collision. The website for Siegfried is siegfriedfinser.com. That's SIEGFRIED. FINSCR.com. Go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly. The book, of course, is available at Amazon and all the usual places books are available across the country. It's interesting in the book, the main character we talk about, Armand Dillon, and he's one that's loved by the stockholders because obviously he produces, but the employees are not real sure, are they? It's really not a love affair with the employees.
No, I should say not. No, but on the other hand, he did give them jobs,
Yes.
And one of their problems, especially the two employees that are closest to Armand, is that they're constantly trying to interpret what he really wants them to do, and their quest is always to please him and to understand what he really would like them to accomplish. and they very frequently mistake what he's trying to do. And as a result of that, you have some crimes occurring. And these crimes are crimes which are really mistaken interpretations of the will of Armand, which I think happens a lot in corporate life.
Well, yes, they're trying to do what they think the directions indicate that they should be doing, but that's not
Exactly.
necessarily, the interpretation is not necessarily the intent. Lucinda Brahms is an interesting character. She's really trying to do what's right, a kind-hearted character. I like her as I'm reading, but she's really conflicted in this process as well, isn't she?
Yes, because she runs into a problem that isn't clear-cut. And it's the question of when you have a project in a foreign culture, do you adapt to that culture and do what is normally done in that culture, or do you try to bring your own values into it and maybe not get the business? So she's stuck in that dilemma, and unfortunately, she doesn't fully understand it. And you might say that her intelligence is not quite up to that particular task. So she has her faults too. She's lovable, but she has her faults.
The book is called Collision. Collision's actually on several levels, and what's interesting is someone, in this case with Armand, might be failing while achieving their overall greatest success. I mean, it really is interesting how this all plays out, isn't it? Well, it's your story, so I mean, you really have a script. Once we start the story process, we can't put the book down because we're waiting to see the next twist and turn the book is going to take.
You're very kind. I think the story does take over. And, you can have a philosophy. You can think all you want about things. But in the end, a story has its own sort of momentum. And it gathers that momentum and leads to a conclusion. And the conclusion has to fit in addition to also be revealing in some way. And for Armand to have this sort of hollow victory at the end of his many attempts at pleasing the stockholders, for him to have a victory that's really not fully there for him, I don't want to give away the end of the story because that's very important. But it's a surprise, an exciting surprise.
It is, and it's always difficult when you're talking about a work of fiction. You want to say enough that people get interested in the story, but not too much. It's like, well, I think I just about heard what it's all about. There's no need to go buy the book. It is a compelling story. You do an excellent job with the narration of the story. Talk about your process of putting all of this together and keeping us hooked, because a lot of times we'll start with what we think is a good story. We get lost about halfway through. That's not the case in Collision. Talk about the process of writing this book.
Well, I'd like to say that I planned it all out and that and every detail was charted and that all I had to do was to write it then. But I'm afraid that's just not how I function. I put my characters together in the first chapter, and then I started to ask myself, well, what are they going to do? And so they started to interact, and gradually the interactions took over. And then I wasn't sure what the end would be, and I could only have an ending that fitted in with their destinies as individuals and as groups, and so even I was surprised when I reached the ending. I said, "Aha!" So that's how it ends.
So the writer, the author of the book, is as surprised as you're going to be when you finish the book. Siegfried Finser, our guest on the program. He is the author of the book Collision, author of a number of books. Collision is the book we're talking about in particular. The website is siegfriedfinser.com. The book is Collision. It's available all across the country. You can link onto our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and go directly to the website. You've said that you believe stories can be powerful awakeners to life's underlying truths. Talk about that and what you attempt to do with your writing and the takeaway. I mean, it's an entertaining book. When it's over, we'll go, wow, that was really time well spent. I enjoyed that. But is there something you'd like us to take away when we finish reading the book?
Well, there are two comments. One, you know that I've written a second book that's connected with this one, which is called Lonely Expiation. Um, and so that I take it a step further. But I wanted to mention that almost everything that a human being does today, everything that he does begins with an idea. And you wonder, how does the idea arrive at a human being? And there's a famous saying that people use very often when you ask them, where did you get that idea from? And what they very often say, it just came to me. And so I have a kind of a conclusion to that. And that is that everything human beings do has a spiritual beginning. And so I always look for the spiritual in what human beings are trying to do and accomplish in their lives.
How far back does that go? Is this something that we pick up and maybe not even aware of it as a child, as we're growing up, or is it something that develops, matures later in life?
I think you start with it, but very often education gets rid of it. Um, I think that's partly also Armand in this book, that he had a standard education. And you know, our education focuses almost entirely on the intellect today. And I believe the intellect leads to inhumanity when it's left alone without the forces of the heart. In other words, Armand and Lucinda are both necessary in the world if they could either collaborate or become a single individual.
Siegfried Finser, our guest in the program. The book we're talking about is Collision. It's available all across the country. Talking a little bit about background and his theory, and you will see this unraveled during the course of the book. You'll see as these characters as they come into focus. I mentioned that you were a Waldorf school teacher. Waldorf is really an interesting educational concept. The 3 stages of child development. Talk a little bit about this, because it's something that really is worldwide and something obviously that's very important to you. Talk about the concept.
Well, I think the concept is to connect learning with development. That I mean, you take a small child, and it's not really all there yet. We all know that, but we think we have to shape it. We have to make it into something. But the small child has everything not yet arrived, but it's there. And by the time they're 21, they're all there. But it's a mistake to think that the only time learning occurs is when somebody's teaching. Learning occurs through the whole of life. As an example of that, reading is not fully understood, because the same capacities we need to understand those funny little letters on a page, that we then understand the whole world that's behind the meaning of those funny little squiggly black letters on a page. We use the same capacities to look at life, and we have to read into life what's really behind what we see. And that's the important learning out of learning to read.
As I understand with the Waldorf, and you were, as I mentioned, a Waldorf school teacher for some time, there's limited testing, and it appears the teachers are given a great deal of autonomy. Let's talk about testing, because everything now seems to be, we measure that learning that you were talking about by testing, and either you do well or you don't do well based on the result of the test. In Waldorf, is limited testing part of that?
Well, it's not really true what you just said. It's commonly thought that, but it isn't really true. The testing occurs all the time, but it's real life testing. What you're talking about is standardized tests.
Exactly. Yes.
In order to become standardized, it doesn't really test anything in the end. It doesn't test progress, and it also doesn't test what's really important for the leading of your life. What is important is how you interact with the teacher, how you interact with the other students, how you also deal with the awakening that occurs in the course of the time that you're in school, and also when you're at home and in the playground. So everything is united, and the combination of the artistic, the scientific, and the development of the body in the course of growing up, all of these are integrated in a remarkable way in Waldorf education. So what you have is a human being that has all their capacities intact by the time they're ready to enter the world and become a protagonist within the culture of our time.
I'm getting the impression that those years you spent as a Waldorf teacher, those are very meaningful years for you. I'm assuming you were really able to shape a lot of lives during that period.
Yes, they were very important to me. Also in high school, I went to a boarding school, high morning school, and in New Hampshire, and the whole combination of the nature around there. I mean, I have such astounding memories of standing in a very large meadow at night behind the school and looking up at the sky and seeing this immense canopy of stars in the sky. I've never had quite that experience anywhere else because there wasn't so much light around me. I could look up and see that sky and the awe. What plays wonder and awe into our lives, for us to have such moments is very necessary.
In the book is called Collision. The author is Siegfried Finser, our guest on the program. I mentioned the background that you had extensive as a corporate executive. How much of being a good corporate executive is that teaching aspect? In the book, Armand is really sort of ignorant as to what other people are thinking. They're ignorant into what he is thinking. There's really not a lot of communication. To be a good corporate executive, how important is communication and how important is the education aspect? Not education, in the sense you're going to sit down and take a test, but just you as a teacher, as a corporate executive, and as a teacher, sort of guiding them through and getting the best out of them.
Well, I was in charge of executive development for ITT. That was about 10,000 executives. Their placement in the right jobs and their development as individuals and also as executives was really the area in which I was active. But I need to tell you, I wish I could tell you a lot of stories, but we don't have a lot of time. But one time, one of my bosses, I had a number of them, but one of my bosses wanted me to do something, and I really felt it was the wrong thing to do. And I went in 3 times to tell him, that it was the wrong thing. And finally, when I went in there, he got really angry with me. And he said, "We've been through this all, and it's time now for you to do what I tell you to do." And then I said to him, if I tell you that all of this is wrong, what you're asking me to do, I shouldn't do, it'll work against me. It's against my better judgment. If I tell you all that, I will also tell you that you're my boss, and I'll do what you tell me to do, but you have to order me to do it. And he stared at me really strongly for a minute or two, and then he said, "No, Sig, you do what you want to do." And that was it. And that's when I realized for the first time that a lot of times power is exerted without the responsibility being taken over by the person exerting the power. And that's something I learned early. And if you're not learning, you're dying.
Exactly. This is fascinating, and I wish we had more time to talk about it. And hopefully we can do that at a later date. Siegfried Finser, our guest on the program. The book we're talking about is Collision, the battle between the unscrupulous intellect and the caring heart, poignantly portrayed through the story of 2 corporate individuals as they tread the waters of dangerous intrigues and unexpected secrets exposed in the corporate world. A lot of substance in this book. You'll really enjoy it. It moves very quickly. There's a lot of action, twists and turns, and surprises in the book. It's called Collision. It's available wherever books are sold. Of course, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, online. The website is siegfriedfinser.com, and you can just go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and link on directly. Siegfried, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again. So much more to talk about. I really enjoyed having a chance to read Collision and really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Hopefully we can do it again. It's been great having you with us on the program.
Rick, you're wonderful. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Once again, the book is called Collision. Siegfried Finser, our guest and the author. We're going to be right back. Take a brief break here on This Week in America. Back after these messages. Don't go away.